Hey kawan, welcome to EDC Ready. Today we are doing a full review of this guy. This is the QSP Parrot in a light green micarta. So I got this guy off of thomastools.com.my. You can check out the link in the description down below. It should either take you to the website or to the product. This guy comes in at about, I think, right around 25 USD. If you look at Blade HQ, I think 24.50 on Blade HQ. On Thomas Tools, it is the exact same conversion. It's about 99 ringgit, which is the actual conversion rate to USD, or close enough to it. Okay, this is a QSP, which is a knife brand out of China. I've owned a few QSP knives in my life before. You've seen them on the channel before. Very good in the budget end. They have some really high-end titanium frame locks as well. Not too big of a fan of those because of the design of the knife. But regardless, we are talking about the QSP the QSP Parrot, wrong bird, which is very much in their budget end of the spectrum. Okay, let's look at the weight here. It is coming in grams. We will convert it. That is about 80 grams, which I forgot how much it is in ounces, but I'll let you guys know in editing later. In terms of the size, let's take a few key measurements right here. Starting with the blade length, this should be a 3-inch spear point. Slightly more than that. There we go. Yeah, it's about 3.2-inch spear point on my calipers. Okay, and then a sharpened blade length of about 3.1 inches. Switching that over to millimeters, a total blade length of about 81 millimeters. We have a thickness of 0.12 inches, which comes in at about 3.0 millimeters. And then let's talk about the handle itself. We have a total handle length of, there we go, let's just line this up. We have a total handle length of 103 millimeters or 4.06 inches, and then a thickness of 0.46 inches, which is actually the same thickness, or right about the same thickness as my Para 3 lightweight. Let's talk about this height, which is quite important for carryability in the pocket, just over 1 inch or 26.7 millimeters. Very, very nice. Okay, so for this guy, I am going to be comparing it to another budget knife. This is another $30 knife. This is a $25 knife. This is the 10 gram Santa Fe, which till this day pretty much holds my record for my favorite budget knife, like that $30 and under, followed closely by a Gonzo, the Gonzo F753M. There we go. But a better comparison would be this guy. So let's get into the review and let's talk about this knife, the QSP Parrot. Starting from tip to butt, we have a blade steel here of D2. D2 is a budget blade steel. They have pretty good hardness and also pretty good toughness. In fact, the hardness from the graphs I've seen, they're getting into the mid-range to the slightly entry-level high-end steel, or entry-level premium steel, if there's such a category, in terms of hardness. So it's definitely a steel that's very much good working steel. It's going to be quite resistant to like chipping or whatever because of its high toughness, and then also because of its high hardness, it can also be slicing for long periods of time. So that's very, very nice. In terms of the finishing, I can see that this is most likely like some kind of a belt satin finish. It's quite nice. It's quite reflective. It's by no means mirror polish, but you have some nice reflectivity coming out of that. Now D2 steel has a downside, which is it is not very stain resistant. This, on the other hand, is made up of Japanese Akudo, whereas the Gonzo just now is made out of 440C. Now it's really up to you what your personal preference is. In my day-to-day life, I would prefer less edge retention and more stainlessness because of the hot, humid, tropical climate that I live in. This guy is not going to be a stainless steel because there's not quite enough chromium content in the D2 steel, but it'll definitely hold its edge much longer than that guy, and then it'll also resist chipping much better than these other options. But yeah, that is D2. Not my favorite, but I can see a very good use case for D2 steel. Now, this knife does come in at 440C. Another QSP I've had before, I believe, is in 440C. So it does have that option, although that option is quite unpopular, or it's quite I'm not even sure if it's in production anymore because I just don't see it very often, but you might still find it in stock somewhere. Let's talk about the blade shape. We have here a spear point. A spear point is a very good jack of all trades kind of blade shape. You know, you're not going to get as good of a rocking cut as a drop point or a Persian blade, but you are not going to get that nice pointy tip that kind of that you get from a Warncliffe that's great for pull cuts, but at the same time you're not going to get the problems of the other side of the spectrum either. It's very much a jack of all trades kind of a blade shape compared to 10 Santa Fe, which has this kind of a sheep's foot-ish, Warncliffe-ish kind of blade. Not Warncliffe, it's more of a sheep's foot, great for pull cuts but not great for rocking cuts. This guy will do better at rocking cuts, however not as good as something of a drop point here. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Very good if you do not have a specific knife cutting task for you. One thing that is nice about this guy is the blade stock is not that thick at 0.12 inches. However, the grind is not that aggressive, so it doesn't really come to a nice thin edge despite it being a full flat grind. It does slice nicely, but I would prefer it if the edge here was just a little bit thinner behind the edge. But the advantage of that is that you do have a bit of a thicker tip at the end here compared to this guy, where you can see how thin the tip is on this guy is compared to this guy. This guy is the QSP. And then that just means that it might not go through material just as nicely as this guy, but the tip strength will be a little bit better than this guy. So all in all, in terms of the blade shape, very good working blade shape. Is very much designed for a tool situation, for getting the job done because of the blade steel, which is D2, and then because of the blade shape, it's going to be a good like jack of all trades kind of blade on this knife. Now, a couple of bad things I can say is that because of that belt satin finish, the edges here at the top here are actually quite sharp. Don't get me wrong, it's not as sharp as the actual blade edge, but the top of the crown here, there's no rounding, there's no chamfering, so it can get a little bit uncomfortable here at the top. You might accidentally have like an abrasion thing happening right here. It's great if you want to use a fire steel and you want to get a fire going, but it's not that comfortable to use when you're choked up all the way. Speaking of choking up, some nice jimping here. It is not as aggressive as like say a Spyderco jimping, but you do get a lot of traction in the jimping up here. Some knives you don't really get a lot of jimping that provide a lot of very good traction. The 10 Santa Fe here, not very high traction. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, which is your Spydercos, like your Dragonflies, your Parrot 3s. Those jimpings are actually quite rough. This guy is somewhere in between. You do get a bit of a sharp edge because of that belt grind. As I already mentioned, there's no rounding or chamfering up here, and then that does carry over to the sides of the jimping. But the jimping itself is kind of wide enough to kind of avoid that issue. You do get some very good traction. Speaking of which, this guy actually has a not very thick blade stock. It's 0.12 inches. It's kind of the same as my ZT0450CF here, also 0.12 inches. But for some reason, the dimensions of this guy, maybe it's how square it is, it makes it look thicker than it actually is, despite it being 0.12 inches. Here's another 0.12 inch knife. This is the Gonzo, but again, I don't know why, the whole blade just looks thick here. I guess it's because there's no wedge at the top here, which gives this guy like a nice needle point here. You don't have that. So again, it comes back down to you're going to have a thicker tip, and then you're going to get stronger tip strength, but less of a pointy tip. So just keep that in mind. Alright, moving back a little bit. Let's move back to the handles. Let's talk about the Micarta. This is one of the first few knives I've ever bought with Micarta. The other knife is actually a fixed blade from Fursan's blade. You can check that out on my channel too. Micarta has a nice feature, which is that it does provide nice grip and texture, but when your hands are wet, it actually digs into the Micarta a little bit more. So when your hands are wet, you actually find that the knife is less slippery, to my understanding. Now with G10, if your hands are a little wet or whatever, you do have that feature as well, although it is not as prominent. And then once you go to something like titanium or carbon fiber, when your hands are wet, the knife gets even more slippery. But this guy, with wet hands or whatever, let's say your hands are really sweaty, or you're in the kitchen and you're using this knife for some reason, the wet handles will actually give it more grip, which is very, very nice. I really enjoyed that. However, you do want to avoid this getting wet because D2, as already mentioned, is not a stainless steel. So with D2, you definitely want to use like some kind of oil or some kind of rust prevention material, and then just coat the blade with it. Now let's move back a little bit. Let's talk about the pivots. You have a nice flat, it's not really flush, but it's nice smooth pivot over here. And then the pivot here, we have T8, which is very nice, non-free spinning, which I do enjoy. T6 here and T6 here. And then for some reason, this guy is not free spinning. This guy is free spinning, so I had to do one of those things where I needed to like have two tools, two T6s that you go in here, and then you have to unscrew them separately. And then you have to unscrew them with each other, which I'm not really a fan of that. It just makes disassembly a little bit more fiddly. I am the kind of guy that likes to disassemble and maintain my knives, so that is kind of unfortunate. The washers here, we have that thing where we have bronze washers on the outside of either side, and then on the inside of that we have the Teflon, and then that contacts the blade on both sides. With budget knives, you do see this quite often, and the reason for that is you need less tolerances to keep everything in place. Like the centering of the knife here is not bad, okay, and then there's no blade play. With this guy, centering is pretty good. The action is nice and smooth. Now it is on washer, so you do need a bit of a shake to get it down, but once you get it past, once it starts moving, it is pretty darn smooth. This knife overall, washers are pretty darn smooth. I used to be like a kind of guy who didn't like this Teflon bronze washer combination, but with this guy, as always, you know, knife technology improves, and you know, it's just a snobbish thing if you only want phosphor bronze washers. With the Teflon combination, it actually works quite well. This guy also has a combination, however this guy does it a little bit differently. On each of this side, you have phosphor bronze washers and then Teflon in between. And then you have that on this on the other side of the blade as well. Phosphor bronze washers and then Teflon in between, and then it's kind of, and then that trio on each side sandwiches the blade. So you do get a little bit more smoothness out of this guy. As you can see, it kind of drop shuts a little bit more readily, and it does that without any blade play either. So you just keep that in mind, that it's not going to be stick slippy, it's going to be smooth, but you are not going to get that kind of drop shut action. Once you go to something a little bit more expensive, which is this guy, Quiet Carry, still working on the review here, full phosphor bronze washers on the outside, you feel a lot of smoothness, but at the end of the day, is it really going to affect how you use the knife? I don't really think so. So you are paying a premium for something like that, and for this guy, that is what you're paying for, which, to be honest, for like 99% of people, is going to be a-okay. Okay, let's move back to the lock. This here is a liner lock. It's just a standard liner lock. The liner lock is a little bit early. We're talking like, say, 25% lockup. A lot of room for the knife, for the lockup to grow over time. You know, let's do a little spine rack test to see if this will fail. Nope, it didn't fail. That's really good compared to this guy, which will fail. Let me just show you. Yep, there we go, fail. So the lockup, pretty darn good. I really enjoy that. The lockup itself, it's nice and easy to disengage because you do have this nice little cutout, enough room for your finger, either the flash of your thumb or the nail of your thumb to disengage it. You can even disengage it with your other finger quite easily. I personally would like a little bit of jimping up in here. That just helps give, that will help give a little bit more traction when you disengage it. But overall, pretty okay. You know, just a good standard safe liner lock, which I really do enjoy. The detent is pretty weak. So detents, you kind of have to talk about two factors of a detent. Number one is that what is a detent? A detent is a little ball. I don't know if you can see it in there. There we go. There's a little ball that goes into a hole at the tang of the blade. So how you increase detent strength is either through more protrusion of the ball that goes inside of the hole that holds the blade in, or it could be from the lock bar strength. So because this lock bar is quite soft, very easy to disengage, you need more prominence of the ball to go into that hole, which it doesn't really have that kind of a prominence. So as a result, the detent is a little weak, a little bit weaker than I prefer. It's even weaker than the 10 gram center face one, which before this guy, I thought this detent was weak, but this detent is even weaker than the 10 gram center face. So what does this mean? This means you have less of a pop. Okay, let's say you just push it out, you have less of a pop, and then your chances of it stopping halfway are much higher. And it's more of a, you need to like push it out. You need to push it out to fully engage the lock, rather than just pop it out. See, it fails again. You can definitely do it on the other side as well. You can actually spidey flick this a lot easier with the middle finger, because there's more travel in your middle finger to push it out. So it does fully engage a lot more consistently when you reverse finger flick. But you can also do it, you can also flip your hand over to the left hand side, you can flick it nice and easily. So yeah, compared to something, this is not fair because this is a $250 knife, but this is a much better detent. This is more of a pop. You see? The actual finger movement is very slow because there's a lot of load up of energy that you can put behind the knife itself. Compared to this, if you load up the same amount of energy, it just stops. You actually need to push it out more along the track of the blade. So do keep that in mind. Okay, I've spoken too much about the detent. I'm a bit of a sucker for good detent. Now, in terms of construction, we have some nice solid construction. Micarta is very good in terms of its solidity, but you also have steel liners that go all the way from the front to the back of the knife. Very, very nice. Pocket clip in the back. I do prefer a deep carry pocket clip, which this guy is not a deep carry pocket clip. However, because of the design here, it is, and because of this little slope, you do have more space here to actually grab your knife and pull it out of your pocket. But for me, I just prefer a better concealment with a deep carry pocket clip. Speaking of clips, there's one thing I don't like about this clip. Compared to this guy, as you can see, the clip is quite rounded. So it's a lot easier to like push your finger underneath here. You're not really going to have like a pointy clip. This guy on the other hand has quite a pointy clip. In fact, the first day I had this guy, I actually hurt my middle finger because how I open up a thumb stud knife is I will put my finger here to create a little bit of traction and then push it out. But because of how pointy this pocket clip is, it's also very, very thin. It actually dug into my fingers a little bit, so I had to kind of like readjust my fingers. So now I hold it in the back. I hold it in the back here, and then I pop it out. This is kind of a turn off for me. Like I've sold my I can't remember what it was. It was a Ferrum Forge something. It was a Ferrum Forge Stinger. I sold that because it had the same problem, which is a pointy pocket clip, and it kind of hurt my fingers every time I tried to put my fingers underneath here to lift out the pocket clip to push it into my pants, or in this case, when I do that and when I accidentally have my finger up on here when I want to pop it out. So just keep that in mind. Pocket clip, not deep carry, and a little bit pointy because of how thin it is. It does hold the knife in your pocket quite well. Let's talk about ergonomics. Yes, ergonomics are decent, not the best, not the worst either. You know, it is not. I don't remember ever having a. It's not a QSP Deva, which was pretty bad in ergonomics. It's not as bad as the ZTO 450 because it doesn't have this point here. Overall, if you like this kind of like flat, long, square kind of design, kind of ergonomics, you're gonna enjoy this guy. For me, I do like a little bit more curve. Okay, in the handle, I do like that little turn down you have here. It actually makes it fit a lot more comfortably in my hand. This guy doesn't have that. It's gonna lock up quite securely because you have your finger groove here for your finger to go into. You have some nice jimping that goes up here. Micarta is nice and grippy. Okay, so yeah, if you do not like these kind of straight, like Ray Laconical kind of esque knives that are just completely straight like this, you're gonna have a problem with this. A few things that they did to kind of help with this is that you have this nice little ramp here. And this ramp here does fit a little bit better in the hands, and it actually feels quite nice in a reverse grip. This guy in a reverse grip fits really, really well because you have your finger here where it doesn't hit the tip of the pocket clip. You can put your thumb here, so you can actually, if you're doing these kind of cutting motion, when you have like something you want to cut through, it actually works really, really well. So keep that in mind. Better in a reverse grip than a forward grip, which is something that I experience in crumbits, but something I rarely experience in folding pocket knives for EDC. Okay, so yeah, one last thing is that I already mentioned this pointy pocket clip. It does create a little hot spot in the hand when you really bear down on it. So in conclusion, what do I think about this guy? This guy, for a $25 knife, and every criticism I gave you has to be in the context of this is a $25 knife. For a $25 knife, this is a great knife. It's a great first knife for a lot of people. It's a great present knife if you want to give it to, if you want to buy a knife present to someone who's maybe starting their journey or someone who would kind of need a knife in their everyday. This is a great knife for that. Because if you think about it, everything here is kind of like vanilla, especially when you look at the other the G10 ones. Everything here is vanilla, but that means it is going to suit a lot of occasions. You have a spear point blade, which is a jack of all trades kind of blade. You have D2 steel, which although not stainless, it is going to hold its edge quite well, and it's also going to be quite tough. Okay, you have an action that is not overbearing. Some people might find strong detents, especially if they're new, might find strong detents actually painful or uncomfortable to use. Because of how soft the detent is, they can even pinch it open, no problem. And after some time, they're going to be able to start fidgeting with it. They can flick it that way, they can flick, sorry. They can flick it that way if they, my index finger, they can flick it that way if they want to. Very easy knife to get into. You do not need to do a lot of disassembly with this guy because it's running on washers. The Teflons can actually run without grease or without lubrication much better than phosphor bronze, and then it will smoothen out over time. This guy, when I got it out of the box, it was actually quite gritty around the pivot, but after some time it's nice and smooth now, which I really do enjoy. Now, pocket clip could be a little bit better. The handles, you have the G10 in the regular version, but I really like this Micarta ones. If you have the extra $5 or the extra 20 ringgit, do get the Micarta. The Micarta is really nice. If they had a Micarta version with a 440C, that would be an even better EDC choice for yours truly. But for you guys, especially if you guys live in drier climates, if you guys like D2 steel, stainlessness is not that important to you, this is going to be a fantastic budget choice for you guys. Okay guys, that is all for the full review, and thanks, and as always, stay ready.